How my wife's affair was exposed through our TV, her secret job scandal, and the investigation that unraveled it all. A little background first: my wife and I have been married for 22 years, and we have one son who's 19. Like any couple, we've had our share of arguments, but nothing we couldn't work through. Honestly, I always thought we had a solid marriage, good communication, mutual attraction, and a satisfying sex life. We both love the outdoors, so we were always doing something active together, hiking, camping, or just enjoying long walks. We've always made a point to stay in shape because we talked a lot about growing old together, staying active, and still being able to enjoy life when we're gray and wrinkled. I'm a paramedic, and over the last 9 months, my shifts have been all over the place. I've been working mostly nights and picking up a lot of extra hours. My wife, on the other hand, is a litigation consultant and has been working from home for nearly a year now. When her firm made the shift to remote work, it wasn't her idea. They moved to a liquid talent model, and she told me how much she hated the idea. She'd said it'd be tough to build relationships and trust without the face-to-face time with clients and colleagues. In fact, she was so upset about it that she even considered quitting. Funny how life works sometimes. Hold on to that thought. Anyway, with me working nights and her at home during the day, our schedules started clashing. I'd be asleep when she was working, and just as I'd be getting ready for my shift, she'd be winding down for the night. Still, whenever our schedules aligned, everything seemed fine between us. We'd laugh, joke around, and just enjoy being with each other. There weren't any signs, nothing that made me think something might be wrong. She'd text me while I was sleeping to say she missed me or share something funny. She'd leave meals ready for me and pack me lunches. It all felt normal, like we were still connected even though our schedules were a mess. A few weeks ago, my brother came over to help me set up a Chromecast I'd won in a work contest. It was one of those rare days off, and since he was also in town from his shift work, I figured I'd ask for his help. We ended up having a good time, messing around with the Chromecast, connecting our phones to the TV, watching videos, and listening to music. At one point, my wife came out of her office after finishing work and asked what we were up to. I told her my brother was helping me set up the Chromecast, and I asked if she wanted him to help connect her phone too. She hesitated for a second, glancing at the TV and then back at me. I assured her it was super simple, just downloading an app. After some convincing, she handed her phone over, but not before she seemed to quickly scroll through or text something on it. At the time, I didn't think much of it. My brother started setting up her phone, and she asked how long it'd take. He said maybe a couple of minutes, and she said, "Okay, I'll just run to the bathroom real quick." Before leaving, she turned back and asked him to confirm he was just downloading the app, which she assured her he was. While she was gone, we weren't paying much attention as my brother worked on connecting her phone. About 10 seconds in, he finished the setup and, as a joke, opened her messages on the TV screen. There was a contact saved as just a heart emoji. Thinking it was between my wife and me, he laughed and said, "Let's see what you two have been up to." I joked back, saying he might regret looking. But as he scrolled, his face changed. At first, he was teasing me, calling me cheeky and saying he didn't know I had it in me. But then I looked closer at the messages. That's when I realized this wasn't between me and my wife. She was messaging someone named Derek. The texts got more explicit as he scrolled, and there were photos, some very revealing ones. And the guy's, anatomy? Yeah, it wasn't mine. My stomach dropped. My brother, realizing what he was looking at, stopped laughing and handed me the phone. One text mentioned a very specific act involving Derek that made everything crystal clear. My brother suddenly got up, mumbled something about needing to go, and left. I didn't blame him. I stood there in shock for a moment, then quickly started recording the messages on my phone. When I heard the toilet flush, I panicked, exited the messages, tossed her phone back on the couch, and ran out onto the porch to make it seem like I'd been sitting out there the whole time. A few minutes later, she came out and asked how long I'd been outside. I told her my brother and I had gone out there as soon as she'd left the living room. She looked relieved, acted like nothing was wrong, and sat down beside me. I got up, pretending to grab another beer, and noticed she'd disconnected her phone from the TV. The screen was black now. And just like that, the weight of everything I'd just seen started eating me alive. After everything I'd just seen, I needed to clear my head. I laced up my shoes and went for a quick run, hoping it would help me process what I'd just uncovered. My mind was racing, though, thinking of ways to get back into her phone to dig deeper. I needed to know how far this had gone, something in me just had to see more. Later that night, I came up with some nonsense excuse about needing to reinstall the app on both our phones because something had supposedly gone wrong with the Chromecast setup. My wife isn't exactly tech-savvy. Anytime something tech-related needs fixing, she passes it off to me. Whether it's the internet, the TV, or her phone, I'm the one who handles it. She even asks me to download coupon apps or games like Wordle for her. So, I figured if I told her I needed her phone to fix something, she'd probably believe me. That evening, I pretended to fiddle with the TV while she was getting ready for her bath. Just as she got in, I walked in and told her I needed to reinstall the app because I'd accidentally unplugged something and messed everything up. She looked a little worried and said she didn't really need her phone connected to the TV. I brushed it off, saying it'd only take 2 minutes, tops, and it'd save us the hassle later. She offered to get out of the bath to help, but I insisted she relax and let me handle it. Reluctantly, she handed me her phone, but not without a warning. She told me to be careful and not to go through anything since she had confidential client information on there. That comment struck me, so I quipped back, asking why she'd have client conversations on her personal phone when her laptop was set up for that. She claimed her work system had gone down temporarily, forcing her to use her cell. Yeah, sure. As she handed me the phone, she threw in a snarky remark, asking if I was sure I didn't need to call my brother for help. The way she said it felt like a jab, as if she were questioning my competence. It got under my skin, but I played it cool, saying I'd call him if I ran into trouble. Now, here's the thing, we've never been the type to snoop on each other's phones. I've always trusted her completely. We know each other's passwords, but I've never felt the need to check her messages or look over her shoulder. Lately, though, she'd been a little more protective of her phone. I chalked it up to work stress or maybe just her playing games to decompress. Turns out, she was decompressing all right, just not in the way I thought. As I scrolled through her phone, I worked fast. I managed to dig far enough back to see that her messages with Derek had started last May, over a year ago. My stomach churned as I read through the thread. I screen recorded everything I could, knowing I'd need to go through it later. Then I emailed the recording to myself and carefully deleted all traces of it from her phone. By now, she was shouting from the bathroom, asking if everything was okay because I'd taken longer than I said I would. I yelled back that I was having trouble with my phone and played it cool, even as the bile rose in my throat. She started asking for her phone back, so I brought it to her and said everything was fine. Then I walked back to the living room, feeling like I was about to implode. Once I was alone, I opened the email and started going through the video, reading months' worth of filth. My son doesn't live with us anymore, he's staying in a condo downtown with his friends. I'd assumed my wife was home alone in the evenings while I worked. Turns out, Derek was coming over, and they were entertaining each other. Not just when I was at work, but even when I was asleep in our bed. It was disgusting to read. At one point, I found Derek's last name from his Instagram because, apparently, my wife follows him there. They were sending each other suggestive memes, lingerie ads, you name it. A quick search told me Derek's an attorney at one of the firms my wife works with. He started there in March of last year. He looked younger than me, probably late 30s or early 40s. I was furious. Going back through the messages, I saw her telling Derek she'd be working from home soon, the same time she told me. She was upset because she wouldn't get to see him during the week anymore. At the time, it seemed like nothing, but now I could see the context. Early on, their relationship was casual, but it quickly escalated. Shortly after I started working nights, she invited him over, telling him I'd be asleep and they'd just have to keep quiet. I felt sick reading it. The betrayal was staggering. It's been a few days since I discovered everything. I've been trying to figure out my next move, but I wanted to get this written down and see if anyone has advice. I need to tread carefully. My wife works with law firms, knows the ins and outs, and has connections that could really screw me over. Update 1, I've met with a lawyer. Before I dive into that, I just want to thank everyone who's reached out with advice or even just tough love. I needed all of it. So yeah, I met with a lawyer. Before that, I called my brother to fill him in on what else I'd uncovered. He's been an incredible support through all of this. He even reminded me about a couple my STBX, soon-to-be ex, and I had gotten to know through her work, a husband and wife team who ran their own law firm. My wife used to do some consulting for them a few years back. We'd have them over for dinner occasionally, went out with them a few times, and even attended a Christmas party or two. But after her contract with them ended about a year ago, they sort of dropped off the radar. My brother encouraged me to reach out to them, saying I just needed to be upfront about what was happening. He pointed out that if my STBX was good enough to work with them, they were likely excellent at what they did. He was right. I contacted the husband and explained the situation. I also asked him to keep this between us since I didn't know if my STBX was still close with the wife. I didn't want to risk her finding out. To my surprise, he responded immediately and gave me some solid advice. He asked me to send him the video of the text thread between my wife and Derek, along with any financial documents, account statements, or anything else I could gather. He also suggested opening separate accounts and discreetly moving small amounts of money from our joint accounts to avoid suspicion. Thankfully, since our son is 19 and living on his own, custody wasn't something I needed to worry about. He also advised me to think about living arrangements once the papers were served, who was staying in the house and who was leaving. I told him I wanted to keep the house, and he said that was fine, but not to discuss any divorce details with my wife or badmouth her. So far, I've only named Derek, so I think I'm in the clear. As it turns out, my wife makes significantly more money than I do. The lawyer said I might be entitled to alimony or spousal support. Our investments were made separately, so we couldn't touch each other's accounts, and thankfully, we didn't have any debts. The house was the biggest shared asset, and I really wanted to keep it. We've lived there for 12 years, and I couldn't bear the thought of giving it up, but I also knew I couldn't afford it on my own. Update 2, the papers were served. When the day came, I told my wife flat out that I wasn't leaving the house, she had to go. She argued that the house was basically her office, but I told her she could find another place to work. Then I hit her with the truth, she wasn't working half the time anyway. Instead, she'd been sneaking Derek over while I was either at work or asleep in the next room. She tried to threaten me, claiming I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But her threats were hollow, and I could tell she was just scared. She knew exactly who my lawyer was, and that's when it hit her how much trouble she was in. After that, I told her she needed to break the news to our son herself. I made it clear he had to hear everything from her, or I'd show him the messages between her and Derek. Reluctantly, she agreed. When she did tell him, he sided with me completely. She tried to apologize, but he wasn't having it. In fact, he even encouraged her to move out so I could have some space. A few days later, she packed up and moved out. My son has been amazing through all of this, checking in on me almost daily and spending more time with me. It's been nice, considering everything that's happened. Here's where things get interesting. I didn't realize when I first contacted my attorney just how good he was. Turns out, he's one of the best family law attorneys in the country. My wife, of course, knew this, which is why she called me, trying to apologize and backtrack. She even offered to pay me to stay silent, worried it would ruin her and Derek's careers. She admitted she'd messed up badly and begged for a second chance. But here's the kicker, my lawyer let me in on a little secret. While my wife was working with his firm, she'd cozied up to one of the partners and leaked information. They found out and quietly ended the relationship, eventually terminating her contract. That wasn't all. The consulting firm she worked with after that caught wind of it, too. Instead of firing her outright, they slapped her with what was essentially house arrest. She was told to work from home, and everything she'd told me about her career moves had been a lie. Her firm didn't transition to Liquid Talent, and her contract didn't end naturally. They fired her, plain and simple. Looking back, it all made sense. The sudden distance between us and that couple we used to hang out with wasn't because her contract ended. It was because of her behavior. Update 3, we settled. In the end, my ex gave me a large lump sum instead of paying alimony over time. I used that money to pay off the rest of the mortgage on the house and then some. The house is officially mine now. Even as the divorce was wrapping up, she kept trying desperately to win me back. But by that point, it was far too late. Things got so uncomfortable with my ex that I had to move all communication through our attorneys. She wouldn't stop reaching out, trying to reconcile, but I wasn't having it. I was done. Because of everything that had gone down with Derek, she ended up losing her contract with the firm she worked for and is now under formal investigation. From what I've heard, she's being investigated for breaching attorney-client privilege. Apparently, she had been aiding certain attorneys by sharing confidential information. It started when some colleagues and clients noticed irregularities, discrepancies in case details, unauthorized access to sensitive information, and even recorded conversations, messages, and emails shared without proper consent. In simple terms, she was privy to details she had no business knowing and shared them to give others an advantage. This led to a formal investigation by the State Bar Association, which could result in serious consequences for her. But that's not all. Word of her actions spread through the legal community, and it uncovered rumors of other unethical practices linked to the firm. It's an absolute mess, a swirling tornado of chaos. But honestly, I'm laughing. She did this to herself. Meanwhile, I'm out of the situation. I've got my house, my peace of mind, and the best son a dad could ever ask for. Life is moving forward.